Okay, good morning. We are live. It's Friday, March 17th. Happy St. Patrick's Day and happy crossover day, everyone.
Woohoo!
It is Senate Economic Development, and we have 4 bills that we are trying to vote out and a amendment on our housing bill to look at, hopefully towards the end of our time together. We're going to start with S73.
Let's cut it off.
For firefighters. And we have Damien in the witness chair.
Good morning. For the record, Damien Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. So you've got draft 1.1 in front of you. The changes start on page 2 of the draft. The first change is on line 4 of page 2. Where we've struck out the language within 2 years of July 1, 2007, which was when we originally provided this presumption for firefighters to while serving as a firefighter. So what that means is that the firefighter would complete an initial and any subsequent cancer screenings while serving as a firefighter in order to qualify for this presumption, or could complete them while serving as a firefighter to qualify. The remainder of that section is unchanged from the underlying bill. And then we've added a new section 2, which is a report due by January 15th of next year from the Director of the Division of Fire Safety to this committee, the Committee on Appropriations, the Committee on Government Operations, and your House counterparts. Regarding the projected cost for the state to fund annual or biennial cancer screenings for all professional and volunteer firefighters in Vermont, the projected cost for the state to fund cancer screenings for all enrollees at the Vermont Fire Academy, Firefighter 1 certification program prior to the commencement of training. So that's the sort of basic firefighter certification. The potential opportunities for the state to reduce the cost for fire departments to provide annual cancer screenings. So if we're unable to fund them, how can we reduce the cost? And then the projected cost for the state to fund replacement of personal protective equipment for all volunteer, there is a typo.
Okay.
And professional firefighters on a rolling basis.
I will note, I don't know how Mr. Doobie feels about this, but we have had a lot of the volunteer firefighters say, is it the official term to say professional firefighters? Because they keep saying volunteer and career.
Probably volunteer and career.
Is okay, because I didn't want to.
Distinguishes between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah, so our statutes
Oh.
use the term professional. But for the study, it doesn't matter. I can call them career
Why don't we
firefighters.
do that? And one day we'll take up the whole issue.
Yeah.
Oh,
So let me make the note here that we're changing to career firefighters, and I need to add an and in 4.
We're already making the change.
And then finally, the 5th and final study topic is ways to reduce the cost for fire departments for the replacement of personal protective equipment. So I meant to say that rolling basis is on a rolling basis so that all PPE is replaced within 10 years after acquisition.
Okay.
Because I believe the testimony was that typically
10
the
years is
PPE has a 10-year expiration date.
Exactly.
And then the report may include recommendations for legislative action to facilitate early identification of cancer, acquisition of PPE, and elimination of PFAS and other carcinogens in firefighting equipment.
Right.
So,
And people may recall Mike DeRocher found all of those to be friendly elements of a study that he could produce or report back to us.
he was happy to take it on, which was great.
That is great.
Madam Chair, just one quick question, and I think all of this is great, and I'm glad we're doing it or proposing to do it. On page 2, there's a provision that the firefighter be under 65 years of age, and
Yes.
I know we discussed it,
Yes,
I don't
we did.
remember what.
Yeah,
we
I was gonna do a little homily about how I really want to address that issue. I think, many people I've talked to informally around the building agree that a majority, they don't have a number of our volunteer firefighters are over 65. I do want to move this and ask the House to look at that more closely.
Perfect.
We just ran out of
Okay.
time.
If we're making these changes, though, couldn't we just change it to 70?
That is a bigger change, I think, than we know. I think some of these were delicate where we haven't been able to locate like an insurance actuary, or, get the Department of Labor back into, so I'd rather not do something that we couldn't take to the floor without knowing the impact.
One thing that I look at, and again, this would be something that would be done, I think, by the House.
Yeah.
I'm concerned a little bit about this listing of the limitations of what the disabling cancer should be,
Yes.
as to whether or not there should be something that says, or any other condition that a qualified medical can link to, or where we can have a preponderance of evidence that something, because there's always going to be something that you've forgotten when you do a list like this.
Well, and newly discovered.
That, again, I think it's something that maybe
I
we
mean,
can look at.
we did burn
you.
pits together. I mean, who would have, I mean,
Yeah.
it's all new. It often, this is sort of newly identified and
Those were the exact two things I was but thank you for picking the other one, because
Yeah.
I think that those two can be expensive, and we heard, if you do that, we want to come back in, from a lot of folks, and we didn't have time for that, but I think the House, the House has a lot of volunteer firefighters and retired career firefighters, and so I think they'll be able to look at that issue with with an experienced eye, and I'll make sure we know that.
Yeah, and it is worth noting, and it doesn't solve the problem by any means of what it's like to try to deal with an insurance company when you get a cancer diagnosis. So I don't want to minimize that, but there is still the ability under workers' comp to prove the link. As we know from the burn pits,
yes.
proving that link can be
Brutal.
exceptionally difficult, and when you're struggling with a life-threatening condition, that can be a challenge. But the law does provide that opportunity. Not saying that it's a good opportunity, it is there though.
Speaking of insurance, may I ask Chris a question?
I think so, yeah.
So,
And you just have to identify yourself as a resident.
so Chris, I guess one of my questions is, career firefighters, I assume all have insurance that comes with the job as a benefit of the job.
So yeah, so for the record, Chris Doobie, professional firefighter, Vermont resident. So with like the town of Hartford, we work with VLCT for our workers' comp.
Right, but you all have health insurance benefits for the job.
Yeah, that's.
But
we
not-
negotiated.
I guess my question is, do all volunteer firefighters have insurance? I mean, this is, again, the House can look at some of this, but
Yeah.
I mean, if they're going to be exposed, we know they're exposed to stuff. Is that a condition of being a volunteer firefighter, is that you have health insurance?
I asked that.
Oh, I forgot that you had.
So,
He was one of
I-
my
I-
favorite cowboys.
So I just want to be clear, there's two different things. We have our health insurance, and we get as part of our employment,
Right,
it's like we have MVP, or Blue Cross Blue Shield.
yeah, no, I'm
The
sure
town
you
also has workers' comp, which is through VLCT, which if I get cancer, if I fall and break my leg getting into a fire truck, it'll be that.
Right.
Now, there are some private, like for instance, Heartland, just south of us, they're a private fire company, or whatever, an LLC. So they contract with a private insurance, not through VLCT. So they get.
For their workers' comp.
From another company.
Okay.
And I can tell you for the record, that we had a gentleman that worked with Fireman with me that had a colonoscopy that recognized colon cancer, filed a claim. And VLCT was kind of fighting with, because he was a volunteer for a number of years in Heartland, going back and forth between the two to fight. So there's always going to be that issue there, because you get, you know what I'm saying, with two different insurance companies, VLCT takes the claim, and they say, okay, this individual also volunteers in Barnard.
right.
Who do they have their insurance through? So they'll go back and forth with that. There's always going to be some sticky points
No,
between the insurance companies, so, but they are covered.
Right, we went through this a couple of years ago, but it's the health insurance concern. I mean, I know they're covered with workers' comp, but it's just the health insurance.
No, I don't believe any, to my knowledge, no volunteer entities are doing that. It's only if you're actually employed by, like a full-time status with municipality that you get that healthcare.
That's a much better answer than I was going to give you, of course. I had asked about workers' comp and
Yeah,
just
no.
to make sure that everybody was covered by workers'. comp.
Everybody's covered by workers' comp.
They should be.
We did that a few years ago,
Good.
which this body did when I believe Ernie Shan was the lead person on that from Weathersfield. But my question is really, this also involves health insurance. I mean, are gonna need health insurance. Anyway, it's a question I will, yeah, it's a big question is if you're a volunteer, can you be
I mean, we don't even get.
I doubt
civil
You should
service.
have other health insurance.
right? We would hope they would.
I mean, normally you have another job,
Just
or
given
you're
what they're
very rich,
exposed.
but I mean, you've got to.
Or you're retired and you're on Medicare. I mean, There's a lot of
It's a
people,
pretty rough job to do if you're
Yeah.
retired on Medicare.
well, we are talking about a lot of people over 65.
Yeah.
It's tough, so I hope they have some. So, that is also a bigger question. Do you want me to add health insurance coverage to the list of questions?
I would say, because I mean, this workers' comp isn't gonna cover all, if somebody is discovered with a serious cancer as a result of their years
Right.
serving as a firefighter,
It's my
workers'
understanding
comp
if you
isn't
make a
gonna cover
claim,
it all.
they accept it. Say, like, Mom, I got it, I had colon cancer, they made the claim, the LCP accepted it, they paid it full.
Mhm.
They went after the other insurance company, trying to,
Okay,
pull whatever, say, okay, you were on that for X number of years, we think you should pay, you don't hold me to this, but
right,
20% of the claim.
yeah,
I don't know how that actually went to court, I don't know how to play that.
okay,
But VLCT took on the initial claim, no different than if I had, when I, say I got COVID, I put the claim in, if they accept it, they'll pay whatever towards that. So,
Anyway, it's, I think it's a question for firefighters, for volunteers, that maybe we want to add to our study, which is maybe an opportunity to provide, if they don't have healthcare, to coverage to, particularly for maybe some of the younger ones, that they, that they explore.
what I don't wanna do is add something to the study that Mike DeRocher didn't have a chance to
Okay.
say.
Fine,
That's
then
a
let's
bit
leave
more
it for the household
complicated.
and raise it with them.
Unless we saw something really glaring, the house does have.
Nope, then let's, I think we're
Look at it.
fine.
I would see if there are any more questions or concerns, and then see if we're ready to move this bill.
So do you
Did
wanna-
make a change? Or-
You could vote it, so the changes I've made are on page 3, line 13. I changed professional to career. And then on that same page, line 20, I've changed volunteer professional to volunteer and career firefighters. So I
Right.
corrected the typo. Those are the only two changes I've got at this point. Is there anything else? Okay, so I'll send this to the editors, but if
Okay.
you can vote it, it's draft 2.1.
Okay,
And then you can just vote it on the understanding that those changes are being made, and I'll get you the clean copy.
Okay, shall we?
Yes, I would move that we pass out favorably draft 2.1 of Senate Bill 73.
Okay, I will call the vote. Senator Brock.
No, yes.
oh, I was like, okay.
Okay.
I'm thinking of another bill.
We're okay, yeah, getting the no ready.
How many do you want?
Put you in the draw here,
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Senator Harrison is a yes. Senator Romansfield.
Yes,
Okay, so the vote is 5-0.
great. Who would like to report this one?
I'm happy to. When do you want
Well,
to as
I
a
was
municipal
looking at
person?
103. I
Oh,
don't know
great,
how
okay.
many.
No, that's fine.
I don't know how to
People should
do
start
that.
claiming,
Okay,
Okay,
that's,
'cause
it's good to speak up for yourself.
yeah. Or I mean, if we do two, I would do this one, but you were involved with it already.
People are
Senator
gonna,
Clarkson.
someone's gonna get loaded up with maybe more than one, but
I'm happy to do firefighters.
why don't you do this one? Yeah, you have a history with the,
And I have the honor and pleasure of representing Chris Doobie.
oh, okay, there you go. That's auspicious then.
Thank you.
Okay, so Senator Clarkson will report S 73 favorably on behalf of the committee. We have 15 minutes before we have David Hall, so I'll just give Damien what your pleasure is. Can you go to 103?
I would love to.
Great.
All
Okay,
right.
so we're jumping, oh, great. Okay. So we're gonna jump to 103. Everything is gonna be a little bit catch can while we edit and get people in. Mostly Damien, but
Okay, so with 103, just pull up my notes.
and while you're doing that, I'll just say, I had a little bit of confusion and others may not be in the same boat, but when the draft we have 2.2 is the one that Julio Thompson from the AG's office had worked on clarifications around with Damien.
Yeah,
So-
so,
I
Our
had, we
latest
just didn't
draft.
know that yesterday, not everyone knew that.
yeah, so after we met 2 days ago, and Julio said he had edits, Julio and I talked right after the meeting, and then we went back and forth by email into the evening, coming up with language. So the first piece here is,
Does everyone have draft 2.2?
yep, I'm sorry, yeah. do you have
It's what we
2.2
worked
ready?
on yesterday.
I know,
It's the draft we've been working on.
I'm sorry, I thought I had it. It's probably in my bag. Could I possibly get another copy?
I can also pull
Thank
it
you.
up on
I
the
was-
screen if that's
Well, I was
helpful.
going to just look at it.
Okay,
I always think it's nice to pull it up on the screen for people watching.
Great idea.
let me log into the meeting.
We have time.
I'm so used to with your Senate counterparts, everything being on paper, that it's one less thing to do.
I mean, I like
So-
paper, but.
I like both.
Yeah, so you're getting your paper copy, but we'll also
Thank
have a screen for the
Oh,
viewing audience.
Scott, I think I have the wrong meeting link. If you could send me the new link. Oh, that's because I was clicking on Wednesday's link. Hold on. There we go. This is, have a cup of coffee. It looks like
I've
we're gonna
learned
be
it's
going for two.
never stops falling. Always something to rest with.
All right. We'll get there. Okay,
103, so we're doing that, correct?
03. There we go. Okay, so coming up on the screen, we're on page 3, lines 12 through 15. And so this, just to ground everyone, if we look back up, this is the equal pay provisions. And so if we go back up to page 2, we've said that it would be illegal for any employer, employment agency, labor organization, or person seeking employees to discriminate between employees on the basis of sex, race, national origin, or against a qualified individual with a disability by paying wages at a rate less. And then the new language here in the new subdivision 4C is nothing in this section shall be construed to diminish an employee's right to privacy regarding a disability or physical or mental condition under any other law or pursuant to an applicable contract or collective bargaining agreement. So that recognizes both the rights that employees have under Vermont's Fair Employment Practices Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act to not have to have disability related questions. And also that they may have greater rights under an employment contract or collective bargaining agreement. There was a question that came up about this yesterday that Julio's with us, but about, well, what about employers who are seeking to comply with this or who don't know that an employee has a disability? The important thing to remember with all of this is that in order to be qualified for the protections, you have to be qualified for the job. So you have to be able to perform the job. The example Julio gave was if the job requires typing 100 words a minute and you can only type 40, you're not qualified for that job. So you may be qualified for another job that pays less, and that wouldn't be a comparator there. So, but this is if there's a known disability and you're paying someone less because of that. So for example, say, you know, someone is recovering from substance use disorder. You cannot pay them less because you're worried about the risk of them relapsing. That's what this protects against.
And that's even if the employer knows about it.
Yeah, or someone has a visible physical disability. You know, for example, they use a crutch or a cane, or they walk with a limp. You can't pay them less if they perform the essential functions of the job. So, and that's what we look at in the disability cases is, can you perform the essential functions of the job with or without a reasonable accommodation? If you can't, you're not entitled to the protections of the law. But either way, under this, the employer can't be asking, do you have a disability I should know about?
Right.
Tell me about your mental health history, things like that. So
Could you have a situation in which an employee has a disability that is affecting the performance of their job? The employer, though, does not know anything about it. And it is not a disqualification. It is not a disability that would prevent them from doing something. Let's say there's a mental condition or what have you, that they just don't do it. I'm just wondering how you resolve for the employer who is faced with a situation and doesn't know that the disability exists.
So as an employer, and I would invite Julio to jump in here and interrupt me if I start to get off track, but as an employer, you're allowed to manage for performance. If the disability is not apparent, it is on the employee to say, so the reason why my performance has been suffering is because of X, and I need an accommodation for that. And then you get into the discussion, which is a back and forth discussion between the employer and the employee about what a reasonable accommodation is. But if the employer is not aware of the disability and performance is suffering, the employer managing for performance isn't going to be liable for discrimination because they're not knowingly discriminating. If the employee then comes forward and says, the reason my work has been suffering is because I'm suffering from maybe a mental health issue, and what I really need is time to recover, or I need to be able to have a reduced work schedule so that I can attend counseling during work. Or the reason I've been late to work is because I'm coming from a counseling session or something like that. Then you get into a reasonable accommodation discussion about maybe changing the schedule. That's a reasonable accommodation.
I guess on the one hand, would that be a situation if the employer knew that this person could not work a full-time schedule because of the disability? Would the employer have made that hire in the first place? And would it have been improper for him to decline to hire someone who could not work a full-time schedule?
It's going to be extremely fact specific, because what you're looking at here are what are the essential functions of the job, and can the employee perform them with a reasonable accommodation?
And I think Julio wanted to jump in too.
Hi, Julio Thompson, Attorney General's Office, Civil Rights Unit. Cases where an employer is unaware of a disability and their actions are being challenged, it's probably the strongest defense an employer has. So under the bill as it's written now, it retains the bona fide legitimate business reason that's unrelated to disability. So if we were investigating a case and we were convinced the employer had no idea this employee had a disability, and we identified reasons such as this person's not the top performer, someone else is, and this employee's never asked for an accommodation, so the employer didn't know that it might have needed one. And the law puts the burden on the employee to ask for the accommodation unless it's obvious that they need one. And so in that case, the employer says, look, I paid them more because they're landing the biggest contracts, and they're a leader in our sales group. And that's going to be a conclusive defense for the employer. The only way it could somehow intrude upon it would be that business justification doesn't exist if the employer's reason somehow perpetuates discrimination discrimination against the disabled. And it's hard for us to imagine how that would be if the employer didn't know. And in fact, that's the case most days. There are many employees who have disabilities, like high blood pressure, they might have anxiety, that's being treated but doesn't manifest in the workplace. And employers make those distinctions based on performance all the time. So I don't think that's an issue.
How do we define disability? I worked in a real estate office that had apartments. People, you know, and there were no pet rules. People had service dogs. They had 3 service dogs. To the end where the employer had to say, you have to have a doctor's certificate saying that, I mean, the ultimate was the service peacock in the airplane. I think there was a pig.
We, just to be clear, under the ADA,
Okay. that's
service
what I-
animal is a dog, or in some isolated instances, a miniature horse. None of the other animals qualify
Okay,
as
But
a
do
service
you
animal
have to
under the
have-
ADA.
can you, do
Where-
you have to have a diagnosis of disability? Or can you just say, I'm a highly nervous person and I can't do this? You know, the color of the wall makes me, I mean,
It's a great question. I can answer. it.
Okay,
I think
good.
Pretty straightforward. So Vermont law and the ABA since the early 1990s give employers the right to confirm that the employee has the limitation. And that can include getting a doctor's note. This person says they can't report at 7 a.m. Can you get a doctor's note? If the doctor's note is ambiguous, they can ask for another one. In some instances, they can have their own doctor do a fitness for duty examination. The employer can also ask whether there are other accommodations that would allow you to do the job instead of the one that you want. So you have a back impairment. I want a $20,000 standing desk. And the employer says, well, we found this $100 standing desk at Staples. It's made of metal instead of mahogany.
yeah,
Is that something we can do instead? And the employee says, yeah, I guess that would work. Then the employer can use its preferred method as long as it allows the employee to do the job.
okay. But it isn't just a self-declared disability. There is the ability
Yeah.
to get that confirmed.
Yeah, it's in the law, it's called the interactive process. And it's actually expected that the employer will have that conversation with the employee because not every disability manifests in the same way. So someone says, you know, and some disabilities don't affect your job at all. Infertility is a disability because it's a limitation on your ability of an essential function of people, which is to reproduce. But how does that affect you as a bus driver? It doesn't. So you don't need an accommodation for your infertility. The only protection is that, well, I'm going to fire you because you have a disability. You can't do that. You can't single people out for mistreatment. But not all disabilities require an accommodation. So the law expects and permits and anticipates that employers will have that conversation to make sure that they can do the job in a way that's not too expensive for the employer, not disruptive to its operations, and not unsafe in the workplace.
So if I were infertile and I was so focused or worried about this, and I'm a bus driver and I went through a stop sign, I could be fired?
Yeah. Yes, I mean, you're held to the same performance standards as anybody else.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think even if it was related, you could probably, that's probably of a greater concern that you go through stop signs.
Right, I
As a
mean-
bus driver.
Yeah.
Like, that's related to your performance.
We have cases where people, I mean, disabilities can happen at any time in your life. You can be a bus driver. We've had cases where people lose their commercial driver's license
Right.
because of vision, or sometimes they have a seizure disorder. And the employer says, I need somebody with a CDL. If you don't have it,
Yeah.
and you need a day off to go to the DMV, that's fine. But if you can't get it, I can't have it.
Or if you can't keep children safe on a bus,
Can't keep
that's
them-
a non-negotiable.
Yeah, common carriers like bus drivers have a higher standard of care than we do as drivers.
Any other questions on this section? I can understand if people want to make not little, I shouldn't say that. I don't want to diminish it. If people want to speak their piece and say why they can't support certain sections, we can take a vote. If people want to wait till the very end and just vote no, either way, but this kind of concludes the equal pay section on race and physical or mental condition. So any other reasons people might vote no that they want to raise now to see?
On this section for,
Yeah, I mean, anything else you object to here that you want?
yeah, no,
Okay.
Okay,
I'm just asking clarity.
No, yeah, I just
Yeah.
want.
So
I wanna
not
give-
all of 103, just this section.
Yeah,
is
just,
what you're
I just
saying.
want to go section by
Okay.
section, and if
Yeah.
you need more time with something, we can try to do that. If you're just gonna vote no overall, I also understand that. I just want to see if there's anything we can do to make sure people are comfortable before we move to a different section.
so, and one thing I just want to note is it's important to keep the ADA and employment separate from fair housing rules. So they are somewhat different.
Okay,
So there are a lot of ways in which they're parallel, but there are some differences and and this is just focusing on employment, Karen. So that's an important thing to just keep in mind for the discussion, because we could spend a lot of time trying to pull out all the
Right,
differences.
and that's gonna be helpful on the floor too, for whoever reports this.
Yeah,
People
that's
might
why
forget.
we're writing it.
Yeah.
So keep
So-
ADA and fair housing separate.
Well, so.
Keep the
we-
different climates
Keep
separate.
employment and
Yeah.
housing separate. So
Okay.
this is just employment.
Right.
So I think that's important, and we can talk about those differences. Whoever's reporting this, we can talk about what employment requires, but this isn't a fair housing bill. This is an employment bill, and it's focused on the piece here, that particular change is focused on a very small subset of equal employment law.
Right, and
So-
just to be even clearer, the fair housing piece already exists, that's in this bill, and we're adding public accommodations. But nothing in this bill changes our current fair housing law,
No.
is that right?
Yeah, the fair housing law is staying the same as it was based on last year's enactment. So the next change that,
Sorry, David is available for us.
sure,
and
I can come
I don't know
back.
how long that is, yeah, so it's I would get, my guess is 15 minutes.
That's fine. I'm gonna run back to my office so I can eat something. Scott, I'm gonna email you the updated amendments. Yeah, I might take a piece of that
Take
monkey
a
bread.
croissant, yeah. or whatever.
The monkey bread, please.
Yeah, we take
Okay.
this.
That is.
Pick your poison. Okay, so we'll maybe get up so we have a note and we'll get up the amendment that Senator Harrison has.
Yes, I just want to give Scott this,
Oh,
so I don't
okay.
lose it. Sorry,
Compassion.
I know my limitations.
Thank you, Jamie, we'll see you.
Yeah, we'll see you shortly.
But eat something. Did you take a monkey?
He did.
Okay.
I took a piece, yeah.
But there's more, so he'll come back.
Good, yeah, exactly. So we'll pull up your amendment now, Senator Harrison.
On S30,
I'm gonna take a really brief bio break.
S30.
the sister state program,
Oh, okay.
it's not a major amendment.
No, if you stay online and pull up do you want to pull up on the screen that Senator Harrison amendment? Let's sit tight.
Well, wait,
Is this something we all have?
I think so. I think Scott printed it out. It concerns the board.
Tab 2.1 of S30.
Yes.
Should be right there, Senator Brown, if you don't see it.
S30. Okay.
These things reshuffle themselves quite frequently. So
It might be underneath your croissant.
could be. Tab 2.1 of S30.
Yeah.
Food, glorious food. It's like study hall in here, guys. We still live? Oh,
Yeah, David, David is gonna be down just a second, he is coming down from House General,
Oh, how
and
exciting.
then we'll go over S30 and Center of Hinsdale, second out.
She did what? She sent out for more food. Oh, God.
This is for you, by bring it to the Senate. Secretary's office.
Oh, I could go do that right now. We're on pause, right?
Chris Doobie, I just printed out all your, oh,
We really have to be in line. Okay.
Oh, I can do those. I'm not doing anything, but ta-da.
Holy mackerel.
You got a haircut.
I love cooking and pastries in the morning.
Help yourself.
Oh, I hate that. My blood sugar levels drop a minute before I do.
There's just some stats.
I have the.
Of course you. Blue the green. Yeah. Blue sea, green.
Oh, that's for later.
Anyway.
Whoa. Ah, that's incredible.
Are those the hats?
On that Friday.
Fun hat
I
Friday.
think we need to have a demonstration of the fun hat.
We're live.
You can only
well,
wear
look,
those
I'm,
if you use Irish jazz hands.
Thank
We'll
you,
have
guys.
it all.
Thank you.
You can take the witness chair.
Thank you.
So we are back on S30. Departure from the other subjects will be focused on today. Sister state program. And we're looking at Senator Harrison's amendment.
Okay, so my teeth are stuck together, but that's okay. So this is a, I think, relatively minor amendment. When we discussed the bill yesterday, I had a thought that there could be other agencies to be involved.
Right.
And I thought it would be helpful to expand the board. So I'm just suggesting that we expand the number of members on the board for this. Now it's a committee, the Sister State Committee. And the original plan was to have, I believe it was 5 members. And now I'm suggesting 2 more each. I'm sorry, I'm suggesting 1 member additional each, appointed by the Senate, appointed by the Speaker of the House, and appointed by the governor for a total of 8 members. And I don't think it's a problem to have an even number because it should be a relatively non-controversial board and they should be able to work together. And I think more representation could be had from different organizations throughout the state.
Any questions people want to raise?
no, I think,
I think it gives the opportunity for more diversity.
Oh, I'm
Do you
sorry.
see an issue?
And I also, no, I
Oh.
just forgot to say, I also added governance
Right.
as
Great.
yeah,
a experience to be looked for. And it could be local government, it could be state government,
Could even be
but just
nonprofit or
governance in
military.
general.
Yeah.
Right, because that is
Right.
something that you learn about when you
so my.
interact with other countries.
So my only concern, which I think I mentioned on yesterday, is education. I'm not sure it has to be international education. I mean, you could have like the dean of the law school.
I
who
agree.
doesn't necessarily have international educational experience, but.
That was
a lot.
our, that was already in there. I just didn't change it.
I know, I, that was the only,
I mean, I guess I doubt they will fixate on that word.
Yeah.
Like, the law school probably has international students and so
Yeah, I mean,
they're
modest.
probably covered. I don't know about it.
anyway, I think this looks, I think I support your changes. I think they're good.
Thank you.
I would
These people gotta be paid.
think, oh, that's
The board and commission.
Well, but it's, normally I've seen language
the per diem language.
that relates to that in terms of that and also compensation and expenses for the public members, because presumably these people are gonna meet at some point.
It isn't I don't know, I'd actually look to David.
Does it add it to the boards and commissions or not?
I mean, you can limit it to, 1 day, 2 days or whatever.
It is, like, it says
You don't
committee.
generally ask people to work for free.
Right. but they don't have like a binding, I don't know, I could be wrong, but I didn't see them as the same as like a,
Yeah, I don't see it like a
Together.
task force that is
Exactly.
working on detailed issues that has to be for X number of days.
yeah. David, do you?
Yeah, so right now there's, so I think this body would fall under the general provision of 32 VSA 1010B, which would give them $50 per day for each day devoted to official duties.
But we just tell them
Legislative
how
members.
often they have to meet, it could be.
The legislative members are not typically compensated under that provision, are they?
No, if you're assigned, you get a per diem.
So
Does it have to
it's
be
a different,
specified though?
it's a different provision that governs legislative members, and that's not the 50, that's the pay rate that you get for the out of set session meeting. So I don't know that you have to specify that this applies. We usually do. I have no idea what this would cost, what kind of administrative costs would be involved. It's nominally housed within the agency, but this sister state committee is really the one that's supposed to be administering the program. So I have no idea how much work is involved or what it costs.
Right, I mean, I think we could even advocate that it go to appropriations, and they just make sure they feel comfortable with, I imagine, I don't know, I don't think they have to meet more than 2 times a year formally,
I would think so.
just to say, how we doing, like, are we, is there an emergency in one of these countries and we need to revisit?
Well, hopefully there's some planning to develop, to build relationship and establish exchanges and stuff. I mean, I can see that they would meet. Do we want to put them under the purview of put them in the boards and commissions world? Aren't there boards?
Well, this is going to be a new committee and a new program, right? So
Right.
I would think the committee would meet a few times initially.
Yes.
To develop the program. They could report back on the cost of the program. if you
Yeah.
like.
Well, as I say, we have legislative members, which is one thing, and we have members of the public, which is another.
Right.
And, normally, if you look at the boards that we formed to do things, there's some pretty standard language about compensation for both categories of people. If we want to make this uncompensated, we can certainly do that, but I just wondering if that's the intent of the committee.
I had no intent either way.
Yeah. It's a good, it is, it's
Well,
a
if
good.
you've got to
question.
meet
We
during,
also have
for
to
example,
report
if
back.
you've got to meet during the summertime, do you want to get compensated for the time that you spend doing it? And do you want to get paid for your mileage from Battleboro back and forth,
Right.
for
Well,
3 trips?
it's unclear that there would be a legislator on this.
There are, there are 4 legislators on it.
Oh, that was not my intent. So we should clear that up.
No, it says
but it-
appointed by committee. It
Okay.
doesn't mean
That they are, okay.
it
Right.
doesn't mean they are
And
legislators.
actually, one of the
Got it.
reasons I wanted additional people was so that it wouldn't be just legislators.
Mhm.
I don't think there's an implication there'll be any legislators.
One way or the other. It's not-
Just
right,
it's not
right.
specific.
Okay, but usually
But there
when we
could be legislators.
do
Maybe.
study committees or something, some people, depending on who gets named, gets paid because it's part of
Mhm.
their job.
Which is,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Other people are just members of the public or have to take a vacation day to come. So you want to make sure that everybody gets some compensation.
Is there like a belts and suspenders thing we should do, David?
Oh, I think it needs to be expressed if you want them to get paid.
Yeah, so can we, but there's standard language.
Absolutely.
Okay, maybe we should add that and just get it sent to Brooks and.
It's the one that you always see when you see the study committees, legislative members.
And you often put in
Yeah.
a limitation on the number of meetings, no more than X number of meetings, so it doesn't become a full-time
If
job.
we don't approach, well,
Mhm.
That's true. Do we want to tackle the number of meetings or leave it?
I would let this go to the House. I don't think we should be prescriptive. It's brand new. I'd let them form and figure out what they,
I'm, I think we already have an amendment on the table and I think it's incumbent upon us to express our intent about whether this should be a paid committee. We don't have to maybe go into the number of meetings now, but we should put the pay language in it unless we really don't feel like they should be paid.
Well, we, quite honestly, we don't know who's gonna be, I guess we can put if a legislator is,
Well, it also could be a new American who could use the, you know.
we don't,
yeah.
then everybody is just paid the per diem, the
That's what
board
I'm
and
saying. So
commission
we were
pay.
gonna do
The
Yeah.
glorious
Okay.
$50.
Yeah, let's do the Gloria standard.
Put the standard, okay.
Put the standard in. Are we, I just wanna make sure, does anyone feel strongly that we put
I think
up a
legislators,
range
ought
of
to-
meetings?
I think when you deal with the legislature, I think they ought to do the same that we do with every other board
Yeah.
of legislators and not set them up, you know, if there are any legislators on it.
Oh, yeah, no, I just meant, are we setting the upper range of meetings? Do you wanna do that now or just? leave
I've
it
not
up to you?
often seen in a permanent body. that
Yeah,
you have meetings.
right.
It's usually
Just a
the
task force.
interim.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there'll be, ACCG can make sure it's not like a daily occurrence, these meetings, so,
I wouldn't expect that there'd be very many meetings, quite frankly, at all.
right.
Right. I'll add that and I'll come back.
Okay, thank
If that's
you.
okay.
Yeah,
All right.
we're around the 15-minute mark, they need to return.
I'll send them a note.
Thanks. It's a good catch. Maybe let's go off live while we have no idea.